guess I just wanted to respond a little bit. I don't know how to answer your question. I wish that were kind of an isolated and unusual example, but I think, as William is saying, that this kind of heavy-handedness on the part of ICE is very common, right? So these things happen. So the guy that you were riding the bus with disappeared somewhere into the detention system. Can you find out where he is? I mean, it depends on your relationship to him. Do you even know his name? Are you working on his behalf? Are you related to him? Right?
Aiding and abetting him.
Well, there's that. There is that. So, so what's really disturbing is the kind of police state tactics that we're seeing increasingly, and the just immense latitude that ICE has to carry out these kinds of procedures. The particular stop that you're describing is very common, however. That has nothing to do with the bus company. That has to do with ICE has set up, or it's actually the Border Patrol, not ICE in your case. The Border Patrol sets up checkpoints on major highways within a certain distance of the border, and Buffalo is on the border, so you're within that range of 120 miles or so. There's one in Vermont. I was coming back from Cuba with a group of Hampshire students last year it was. And we came from Montreal, we crossed into Vermont. We got a really hard time from the customs people at the Vermont checkpoint because we had been in Cuba and they couldn't figure out, I had all these letters that said we have authority from the federal government to be in Cuba on an educational program, and they still they kept us there for about an hour and a half. And then, as the bus pulled into somewhere near White River Junction, Vermont, which is about an hour and a half south of the border, there's a Border Patrol checkpoint, and the guys in green get on the bus, and they're hassling, of course, all the people who don't speak English or who can't find their paperwork. We didn't get hassled at that point, but that kind of enforcement inside the United States is quite routine. There are major highways all over Texas, Arizona, California, where a couple hundred miles in, there are major checkpoints. And it's very typical for Anglo-looking people just to get waved through and they don't ask. I've been on the bus from Canada a number of times when people who are darker than I am are asked for their papers, and I've never been asked. I wasn't born in the United States. So my favorite story, though, is that coming from, I went to Toronto and came back into the United States at Niagara Falls. And this was, it was 3 months after the 9/11 attack. And I'm driving. I stop at the booth and the guy says, "Were you born in the United States?" And I said, "No." He says, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Where were you born?" I said, "Cuba." And he says, "Okay, just go ahead." Right? Now, how do you explain that, right? I could have had Osama bin Laden in my trunk and he wouldn't have known that. So again, it's the problem of discretion, right? The problem is that these agencies have this enormous discretion that's pretty much unfettered, right? There is no check on the degree of police power that this agency is allowed to exercise, especially because now it's done in the name of national security. Once you raise the national security issue, all bets are off. I mean, everything goes, it's fine. You can keep people in detention for as long as you need to, or as long as you say you want to or need to. You don't have to bring charges, you don't have to show that the evidence. Right, we know the litany of reasons why national security trumps everything else, and that's partly what's going on here.
Other questions?
A question about the Minutemen project, because I know that publicly they have tried very hard to distance themselves from white supremacist groups and also make the claim that they really check to make sure that the Minutemen are not racist. And so I'm kind of wondering how realistic that is, and what they mean by saying we check to make sure our members are not racist.
That's the question. You go through a criminal check to, of course, and then there's a questionnaire that you fill out about your attitudes. And this is a big part of my project, is peeling racism out of nationalism. And because it's for so long been conflated, that they're right. In their bylaws and their doctrine and everything that they put out, you won't find racist language anywhere. But when you sit with people, and after a few Budweisers, 1:30 in the morning, you see a different side. you know, and so that's a bigger part of the problem, that you can have an organization that's legitimate because on paper it isn't one thing, but its participants potentially have ulterior motives. I'm not going to say that's a blanket statement for all of the participants. There are people who are truly concerned about the economic effect, particularly in the Southwest, that undocumented immigration is having. And when you look at, particularly the state of California, it's easy to make immigrants the scapegoats. Many political careers have been built upon that. But it takes a long time of listening to a lot of, how better way to say it other than just stuff, before those strains come out. And they do, if I had to put a quick characterization on it, they do come out with two very specific groups of people. The younger, less educated militaristic crowd, and then the older World War II like hanger-oners, in which nationalism is also still very conflated with racism. Right? It's necessary to other people in racial ways to make them the enemy.
I actually also had a question for you, Carolyn.